Hello and welcome to the Kickstart Connections podcast, where we hold big conversations about all things small business. I am your host, Lucinda Underwood. Joining me in the studio for today's episode is Ritika Saraswat, founder and CEO of Redefined. Ritika is also a speaker, writer, creator, and part of the human capital team at Deloitte. After being an international student herself and experiencing imposter syndrome, low self-esteem, and a lack of sense of belonging, Ritika created Redefined in 2022. With the goal of empowering people from marginalized communities, especially the BIPOC community and international students, Redefined provides them with access to education and the necessary resources that help them get ready for the real world and explore their full potential. Through this work, Redefined have been able to impact over 30,000 people in just 18 months in India, Canada, Uganda, and Ghana. For her work, Ritika has been awarded the Iconic Women Award for creating change in the world from the Women's Economic Forum and the Indian Achievers Award by IAF. Ritika is a 2-time TEDx speaker, a motivational speaker with Jack.org, has been featured in articles by the Michigan Times and StudyInternational.com, and was selected as one of Canada's top 3 professionals to be an ambassador and speaker at the One World Conference in Ireland in 2023. She also sits on the board of directors for 2 organizations, Teen Wiser and UN-affiliated Girl Up. Ritika, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to Kickstart Connections.
No, thank you for having me. I think whenever someone introduces you, it's just kind of surprising. You're like, okay, I've done a bit of work.
I know, but you know what? And I'm reading through this and kind of putting this together with you. I'm like, you have done a hell of a lot.
No.
In a very short space of time. So, I mean, I don't know where you have the time to do it all, but congratulations.
I have no idea either.
You're obviously very driven, which is great.
I hope.
But and we're going to dive into this because, Kickstart Connections is all about entrepreneurial journeys and stories and, our whys and what makes us do what we do and why we're passionate about it. So that's what we're going to start with. So
Perfect.
maybe to kind of get introduced, tell me a bit more about your background, and then ultimately what led you to create Redefined and enter the world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, no, I think that's always an exciting question. Well, a bit about me would be I'm originally from India and I came to Canada about 6 years ago.
Okay.
So I came here as a classic South Asian kid wanting to become a doctor because my parents told me the only way to create an impact in the world is by being a doctor.
Wow.
And I was like, done deal, here I am. Once I came here, I kind of realized, the diversity within North America made me to realize that impact lies beyond a profession. And it's not really about what you're doing, but it's about how do you make the most of where you're at, right, today. So realizing that, I kind of just kept myself open to trying different things. Ended up falling in love with business. Found myself working as a freelance consultant for 2 years for startups and nonprofits, both Canada and US. After that, I worked for 2 years in the higher education space, drafting mentorship programs actually for international students. Yeah. And once I was doing that, I kind of noticed a few gaps in the educational space. And that was kind of, you could say, the pivotal moments in my career where I realized, wait a second, I don't come from a business background. And what I realized was people like myself were not getting access to education on networking, public speaking, etc., because it was only reserved for business students, right? And realizing that this became more of an issue for international students who came from more of those collectivistic cultures where this idea of humility kind of really goes against this idea of self-advocacy, And as you would know, self-advocacy is the be-all and the end-all of North American job market.
Oh, well, 100%.
Yeah. So realizing that that's such a big issue, and it wasn't just me, but so many other students having such not traumatic experiences, but just not having that barriers to entry just because of not knowing how to navigate that space. Maybe you feel like, okay, we got to do something about this. So that's when I started Redefined. As its name suggests, the whole idea of helping individuals redefine themselves and their capabilities based on their ideas and ideals that they define for themselves, not on what others define for them,
Yeah.
Because the cultures we come from, we have always let others define things for us. Even when we come here, because we come from another culture, it carries certain stereotypes and judgments in terms of what success would look like for us, right? So really helping people by giving them the space in terms of access to education where they're able to really upskill themselves and develop those real world skills, as you would call it. And secondly, creating access to opportunities in terms of access to mentors, fellowship programs, internship opportunities, scholarships, even if it's in small ways, any which way in which we can support them and give them access to role models like themselves who look like them, speak the same language, come from the same country, the same economic background. But here they are, living their lives to the fullest and just helping people realize, hey, you aren't made to just be driving a truck today or just be working at a cafeteria.
Right.
You deserve a lot more.
Yeah.
So that was the whole idea behind, I never thought of it, I'm becoming an entrepreneur, but it was more about, I want to create an impact. And at that moment, it just felt like being an entrepreneur made the most sense. Obviously, now I also work at Deloitte because, again, that's another story. But the reason I started working here was also that impact piece, which I think I make sure remains consistent throughout, no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. There's so much that we could dive into in that. But it's, it's interesting because, I mean, I'm not from North America, but I'm from a very similar culture, right? So, I've been here for 13 years now, and my transition had its struggles, don't get me wrong. I always would, moving to another country, but not in that same kind of way. And I think it's so important to highlight that because there are a lot of barriers. And you were talking about, how you really open up that access to resources, scholarships, mentors, which is huge.
Yeah.
And I've got to think, even from my experience when I first moved here, I wouldn't know where to go for that kind of thing. So having that kind of support through Redefined is, I can see why you've had so many people get involved with the programs. That's absolutely fantastic. And actually, speaking of that, let's dive a bit more into, because I know there's lots of different things that Redefined does as well, and lots of things that you offer and all of this kind of thing. And I would love to hear more. So could you take us through, some of the services you provide, the types of, clients, I suppose, that you work with, that kind of thing?
Perfect. Yeah. So Redefine has an interesting model, actually. So we obviously are a non-for-profit, but I think very early in our careers or journeys, we realized that being financially sustainable is to the core of any non-for-profit. We did not want to rely on grants because what that ended up doing was cause delays in us being able to deliver in terms of certain initiatives we were planning, right? And it just felt like every person was being left by themselves and us not being able to cater to their needs. So I think just to become more financially sustainable, I always say we have Redefined Global. And under that, we have two provisions of it. One is Redefined for students or the youth, and one is the more non-profit side of it. What I mean by that is Redefined Students is more about empowering those international students and communities within Canada and eventually other places as well, like US, Australia, etc., which have, again, a high percentage of international students coming in every year. And we charge them for their programs. So a lot of the initiatives we do, we charge them a minimal fee of $5 to $10 for workshops, seminars, our mentorship programs, conferences, anything that we run. It creates accountability amongst them to show up, and B, that funding is what we use to fund a lot of our nonprofit initiatives back home in places like India, Pakistan, Ghana, and Uganda. So what we're doing in those spaces is we're helping this international student community while empowering them. We're leveraging their resources, their knowledge to give back to their own communities back home. That way it becomes that kind of like full circle in a way and helps them feel fulfilled at the end of the day. Because I think empowering students is not just about only giving them access to things. When we were starting out, there are other organizations doing the same work. But the biggest part is there are so many of us, like international students to work with, 800,000 international students come in every single year.
To Canada?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
None of us are enough to deal with that kind of breadth of, student population coming in. So the more, the better in a way. And secondly is you always need to have the differentiator. What a lot of organizations focus on is, give them a list of jobs that are available to them, right? Which is great. But you got to teach them, how do you get those jobs yourself? Because if someone gives you a job, it's not going to make you feel confident. And our end goal is to empower these communities from a self perspective, more so than that external point of view. Because once you are confident in yourself and your abilities, the world is your oyster. You can do anything you want, you need to feel invincible. And then that's our goal for these students. So I think you need to cater to it from a holistic point of view, is how do I make sure it's not just community piece through our WhatsApp groups and a lot of social initiatives that we do. So we recently started doing informal events because we listen to our students, right? Everything they want, we want to provide, right? Our last event, networking events, which we do, I'm a huge advocate on networking. Few students who are up, they're like, Ritika, why don't we do something more fun? I was like, yeah, tell me what you like to do. Why don't we do more informal events? So we recently did a hike in Halifax. We had about 45 students show up. We all went on a hike together. It was fun. And we're doing one in Toronto now. We have one in Vancouver coming up. We're planning movie nights as well, or even also cycling around. So that's one of the things we do for the community building. To take it a step further, now we come to the professional side of things or the career aspect, because you need to land a job to fulfill your obligations and responsibilities even back home, right? So for that purpose, we provide a lot of career counseling and tutoring to students, both from an academia perspective, but also like generally from just a job search, resume, cover letter, interview, that kind of perspective. A part of that is the networking piece. Now, that is the biggest component where I say that self-advocacy part is missing, because a lot of students are not aware what networking is. If they're aware, they have the misconception that networking is just about reaching to someone, having a call, and you're done with it. But it's more about building a friendship with these individuals, right? That's how you get opportunities. I always tell people, I landed jobs at all the top 4 consulting firms right out of graduation. It didn't happen because I'm the smartest student, not at all, right? It happened because I just made those connections and developed those relationships with these people.
Right.
And that needs you to be strategic. That requires you to be confident, to actually put yourself out there and, showcase your value proposition to people and put that on the table. And that happened because I come from a science background.
Right, yeah.
Think of me transitioning. I had people tell me, you cannot get a job in consulting, right? I had a director tell me that once. I cannot mention which company, but, about 6 months after that, I was like, here you are, 4 jobs on the table, right? Thanks for letting me know that.
Well, but, so much of it is, and I was thinking this actually when you were, kind of going over your background and what led, so much is about confidence.
Yeah.
And it
100%.
is about, and I agree with you completely with the networking side. Yes, a lot of people think you go to networking events, you exchange some business cards, and then they wonder why it doesn't actually work for their business, right? But it is but you also need that confidence to feel like you belong in those rooms.
Yeah.
So the fact that you are recognizing that and helping kind of build that, the inside kind of feelings that need to lead there is absolutely fantastic. And, I've been an entrepreneur for about 18 months myself now as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. After coming out the corporate world. And that's a lesson that I've really learned is, you need those strategic partners.
Yeah.
You need that community around you, and you need people that understand where you come from and where you want to go.
Yeah.
And can help you
100%. And I feel like a lot of people think we just focus on students. We are focusing on newcomers overall, right? Like even people who are fresh out of graduation entering into their first corporate jobs, like myself. I'm still a newcomer, right? I'm still an international student with that background. So I think, how do we support ourselves even in these careers to make sure we are advocating for ourselves while in the job, so that we just don't become a hardworking person, right? We become someone who is moving up the levels, right? How do you make sure you're negotiating salaries? How do you have those conversations? How do you make sure you're getting promoted after spending a certain amount of time in the job you're in? How do you make sure you're getting leadership opportunities? Because I think today it's not about the role you occupy, right? Everyone is a leader no matter what level you're at. It's all about how can you advocate yourself? And I think it goes either ways, right? You cannot expect someone to do it for you unless you put in the effort for it.
Right.
And I think the self-effort, is the most difficult part, because you need to overcome a lot of self-doubt, right? A lot of anxiety as well. A lot of fear, especially in today's time and age, with AI and technology happening, with recession going on. You see people who have been the most confident crumbling down in some ways, being restrictive in terms of taking risks, not being able to be very open with their employers in terms of what they're feeling, what they need today, because they're fearful, hey, what if I say something and I lose the job? But I'm like, what if you say something and you actually get promoted, right? And you actually get that better pay that you deserve, or you actually get that day off that you deserve for your mental health. So I think those things, like bunch of those, become so important. And I really strayed away from my answer, but
no, because this is such like these are the kind of topics I could talk all day about. But yeah, it's about allowing yourself vulnerability.
Exactly.
Allowing yourself to be scared, but doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And you need a toolkit to be able to do
100%.
that. You need to be able to, you need to develop those kind of skills so that when those tough times come, you just you got that grit, right? And you just dig in and you keep on moving forward. So yeah. But anyway, yes, going back to, sorry, I know we get off on tangents really easily on this show.
No.
But yes, going back to kind of some of the things that you do, so education programs, and tell me a bit more about your events and things as well, because I know sort of what led to you being here today is you connected with the BNV media team who produced this podcast, and you were speaking with them about doing some live podcasts and some pop-up podcasts at your events. So tell me about some of the events that you've done so far.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think there are a few variety of events, as I was mentioning. I think we have informal events, more of the formal or kind of networking events. We have panel discussions that we do, a lot of seminars and conferences. We have one coming up in India in December, actually, an education conference. And then we have one coming up in September 1st in Toronto. It's called the Newcomers Collision. We just literally picked up on the term collision because it was trending. And I was like, hey, let's do a Newcomers Collision, right? So it's a collision conference in a way for a day, about 6 to 7 hours, similar to the collision conference, but just with a focus on international students and newcomers, just helping them settle into Canada. And I think the reason I spoke to BNV Media was because I think it's so important in today's time and age to bring to the surface stories and experiences of individuals who have had those lived experiences in a way, right? Who have been there, done that, and have survived through those challenges. Because I think what gives you hope at the end of the day is sometimes seeing those other individuals who come with similar backgrounds like yourself and have made it through, right? That gives you the hope that, hey, if they could do it, I can do it myself as well, right? So I think like being able to bring that not only online, but even in person in front of them through those live pop-up podcasts at any events or conferences you're hosting, I think is a great way to get students involved, right? Whether it be initially just listening and later on having a Q&A session, or even having a mingling session where you actually get to interact with the people who are coming at that podcast, at that guest, right? To take those conversations beyond and build those relationships that we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Which eventually become those friendships, mentorships, etc. So I think that has been another idea.
Yeah, and it's so true, because you want to get, again, I'm kind of thinking back to some networking events that I've been to, and some that have been great and some that have been a bit more kind of surface and all of that kind of thing. Because what you want to do is you want to facilitate real connection.
100%.
And by sharing stories, by sharing experiences, you can do that, because it's easy to go to a conference and you see somebody stand on stage and talk about all the things that they've achieved.
Yeah.
But that's only half of the story.
Yeah.
That you don't always get to hear about the struggle that led up
100%.
to those achievements, right? So although that is inspiring, it's making things relatable. And, it's a lot of the reason that we started this podcast is, I was going into the entrepreneur world. I was terrified. I'm doing it by myself. And I'm like, I want to meet people that are going through the same things as me and talk about it. And then I'm like, I want to talk about it so other people can hear it.
Yeah.
Because I think it does make such a positive impact, and especially for students.
Yeah.
They have limited real world experience, and then there's that trepidation of what's it actually going to be like once I finish school, right? It's the unknown. So to be able to, like you say, hear those stories and hear those experiences is going to help with the confidence levels.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges today, right? We talk about, hey, we're all growing, right? We have advancements in technology happening. But why is it when students graduate, not just international, but even most, why are we seeing the highest unemployment rates today than ever before, right? Maybe that's hinting something about our education systems today. Maybe they have become outdated. Maybe there is revolutionization needed of them, a redefinition needed, right?
Yeah.
Because if you see, especially with AI and technology coming into the space, it is stressing upon us the need to redefine education, to redefine careers and jobs today. It doesn't mean it's going to overtake us. What it's pushing us to do is just become more strategic in ways, become more efficient in ways, and just adapt, right?
Right.
Because what it's helping you do is cover up the groundwork or the stuff that's more manual in nature and actually focus more on the strategic tasks. So if anything, I see it more as a blessing than a curse, and I feel like if we don't do our part of adapting to it, right, and redefining those aspects that currently exist or redefining our institutions and educational systems that exist, that's when we end up finding it a curse, because what it's doing is what our education systems today teach us to do, that's something AI is doing, right? So our education system has to start getting better, right? Why is it the case that if our education system was so good, why is it when a student graduates, they're like, oh, I'm not really sure what I want to do? Right?
Yeah,
I'm not really
you
sure.
should know by the end of that 4 years.
Know.
Yeah.
And especially when, as an international student, you're investing those 6-figure amounts, right, into your education, and you graduate not knowing how to navigate this space, not having the support on how to do so, and being unemployed. I recently came across a story of an international student and was able to talk to him as well. He stayed under a bridge for 4 days.
Wow.
Because the rates of like housing, etc., are rising a lot.
Yeah.
Graduated from a great university, right? Cannot mention, but graduated from a great university, comes out of university, looking for a job, cannot find a job, right? Family cannot support him. He runs out of options. Even part-time jobs have become difficult now for international students, right? So he gets no job and he figures out, okay, I guess I got to just live somewhere, right? And he lives on the bridge for 4 days because he's not able to get those job opportunities. And you can imagine if someone's living out there on the streets, it's so much more difficult to now look your best self, to show up to those interviews, advocate for yourself. Your self-confidence is going down. So it's like, if we talk about, I have seen a lot of people in government always talk about future of Canada is our international students and immigrants, right? If they are, why aren't we putting in the effort to support them and help them reach where they are?
Yeah.
Why is it they are the major workforces in cafes and restaurants today, right? Why is it that having a racialized person who works in a corporate space takes longer to get promoted compared to the other folks, right?
Yeah.
Why are those factors existing? And it's like, we are improving. Don't get me wrong there. We are definitely making a lot of improvement, but I feel like there's a lot more to be done, especially from an educational perspective, because it starts there. That is the root cause of things today. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I was thinking when you were kind of talking about the education piece, my personal experience, I left school after high school, went straight into the workforce. I then went back and did my business degree at 27.
Nice.
And I studied part-time over a few years, but doing that, being in the workforce for 10 years before going back to study business, really made me see some gaps.
Exactly. Yes.
Really made me see some gaps. I had I went to a great school and met some great professors and things like that, but I'm talking more kind of the content.
Yeah.
It seems that the education is a much more functional education as opposed to actually teaching the human skills required. And so it's no wonder that, people, I even thought, God, if I'd have done this at 18, I don't know where I would be now.
Yeah.
Because I learned so much by just kind of going into the workforce at 17 when I went into the workforce. And so, it was good to kind of get the balance of the two things. But I agree 100% with what you're saying. And I think, yes, things are improving.
Yeah.
I think there is a bit more awareness out around it. But I still don't think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, I still don't think that there is enough of a belief in the fact that, hey, if we do these things and if we remove these obstacles and these barriers to newcomers to our country, we're going to be better off for it because we're bringing in talent. Why are we not using talent?
Yeah, no, 100%. If you talk to any corporate firm today, one thing I can guarantee you they'll say is one of the highest percentages of people that they hire are South Asians, right? If you ask them that. And so my question to them always is, if that's the case, why don't we have specific practices, training programs, etc. in place to benefit them, right?
Right.
Because coming back to our question about those Canadian relevant experiences, which becomes that excuse to, de-promote people or start them lower in the, like the hierarchy levels. Like, if that's the case, why don't we draft training programs, right? To invest in these individuals, give them the cultural training experience if you think they're missing that. And I agree 100%. The culture in India or anywhere else is different from the culture in Canada.
Right.
100% they need training. So give them the training that they need. And if they perform well, put them at the position that they deserve.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Give them the access. That's what accessibility is about. That's what equity is about. Giving them the opportunity to pursue a particular role or pursue a particular position. If they don't fare well, that's a great reason for why you should not be putting them there.
Yeah.
But if they fare well, right, and they show the results and put in the effort, well, they deserve to be there, right?
Right. And they're going to benefit, and so is your company going to benefit, you know? It's funny because in my business, I work, I'm a consultant and trainer.
Yeah.
In the automotive industry. So that's my background.
Yeah.
I was in kind of working in dealerships for years. I was then in the corporate world as a sales director and this kind of thing. And a big focus of mine in my training and really kind of what I'm passionate about is, you know, opening opportunities more for women in automotive. It's typically a very male-dominated industry. And really just, you know, diversity is something that is really needed in the industry. And I was kind of smiling when you were saying about, you know, you ask corporation, you know, they say, well, X percentage we hire are from these backgrounds and all of this kind of thing. I always like to then look and say, okay, but what positions are they in?
Exactly.
What, you know, what do you know, who do you have in leadership? Who do you have that are bringing their unique experience to the table?
Yeah.
And that's once you start diving into that, that's where you see a lot of a lot of opportunities, shall we say. Yes.
Yeah. A more positive way of looking at it.
Yeah. Opportunities, right? You got to see it as an opportunity, but it takes that look in the mirror, which can be hard, right? We're all human. We don't like to look at what we're not doing so well. But I think it's important to. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. I was saying like sometimes it's also important to create the transparency, because what happens with big corporations is the leaders are making certain decisions, but it does not boil down to the ground level sometimes, right? Decisions made at those top levels because they are thinking from the overall perspective, like the holistic perspective. And they seem to be making those right decisions. If you actually talk to leaders and CEOs, right? Like I had the opportunity to talk to the CEO of Deloitte Canada, actually.
Wow.
And when you talk to him, it's just amazing, inspiring individuals. And, you know, they are making those right decisions at those world levels in a way. But does that actually translate to the ground level implications at things? Not really, right? Because it's all dependent upon the subjectivity of the people who are sitting in those leadership positions in those different hierarchy levels, right? Because it depends upon their background and experiences, right? The experiences they had working with their employees in the past. If they did not, if you are let's say, for example, something simple would be, if you are a BA 5 years ago, you are limited to BA roles. You're not thought of as a leader. But if you're a BA today, you would be taking leadership on opportunities, right? You would not be evaluated based on the role you occupy within a firm. You would be evaluated on the basis of what kind of results or outputs do you create within the firm. There's a huge distinction between the two, right? But if you have someone in that leadership position who is still thinking with that 5-year behind mindset, they're not going to be open to you growing up within the firm. Same comes with cultural also, right? Cultural backgrounds and aspects as well, and how you view those individuals, right? So I think there's a lot to be done from a training perspective. I think it all comes to training and education at the end of the day. I think that is the be all and the end all. So if we just, I think, draw our attention to education, not just, and it goes both ways, right? As I mentioned before, education both for the employees currently within that company so that they can best be inclusive for the incoming people, but also education for the people who are coming into the firm to understand the culture of not only the country, but also the culture of that particular company. Because I would imagine it's distinct, right? So if we just invest a little bit of time and effort, and obviously finances would also go into it, but I think the outputs you'll get in return are going to be insane, because every employee working with you is going to be satisfied. And it's statistically shown if an employee is satisfied, the returns they bring to an organization is a lot higher, right? So it does solve a lot of problems.
Right. And I mean, there is so much in, you know, especially since COVID, but there is so much, you know, employee retention is a huge challenge for, I think, pretty much every industry right now. And again, it's that investing in your people. If you invest in your people, you know, not only will they, you know, provide a higher standard of output and all of this kind of thing, but they will stay, right? They will feel fulfilled. That's what everyone needs, is fulfillment and purpose, right? If you can provide that, then you're moving in the right direction. You know?
And I feel like the only thing I would mention on top of that is make people a part of the conversation. I think that's something we miss out on always, is like anytime I talk to people, whether we are looking at DEI strategies within the firm or whether we're looking to create an impact in this space or submit like a research article on Indigenous youth, make those individuals who are part of those communities a part of the conversation, because they are facing the ground realities. Ask them what they need, right? If it's about solving problems with newcomers and people are like, oh, we don't really know what they want to do, we're doing this research, just bring them onto the board. Have them be a part of those conversations. Help them see the decisions you are making and let them add their perspective on things, right? I feel like sometimes,
100%.
I know it's a lot more complicated to execute on, but even simple steps like those of just starting to make them a part of the conversation can make a whole lot of a difference, right?
But I don't think it has to be that complicated either. So, I mean, I see what you're saying, but, I think even just as individuals, just by taking the time to meet people from different cultures, because we do tend to kind of stick to what we know and surround ourselves with people that are like us. And that, that's going to minimize our creativity or our open-mindedness. So it's giving people a seat at the table.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch topics a tiny bit because we're talking a lot about what redefined, what you've been doing and all of this kind of thing. But I'm sure just from speaking with you, I know that you've probably got a ton of stuff in the pipeline as well. So, moving forward, how are you looking to grow Redefined, and are there any exciting projects that you're working on that you wanna mention today?
Yeah, no, definitely. Great question.
I'm intrigued.
No, I think the biggest part for us is like, we just realizing, okay, we have impacted a certain number of individuals. How do we move beyond this? And I think a big part of it we realized was finances at the end of the day to help us keep moving forward. So the way we have been switching is we have been looking for a lot of sponsorships right now. One of our focus areas has been applying to a lot of governmental grants or even getting involved with the government. So right now we're focusing a lot of our efforts in building those connections, because we have been hosted about 40 plus events across Canada, right? All in collaboration with university clubs, faculties, career centers, etc., and even individually. But now we're like, how do we take it a step beyond and impact more of these communities and not be limited to just the university circle of individuals, right? And to do that now is when like City of Brampton, Ontario, Hamilton, we're really trying to get involved with that, speak to counselors who are part of these regions, right? And get them on board and supportive of the work that we are doing, because I think that's key. In terms of certain initiatives we have coming up, we have one of our biggest conferences. Not too big maybe for a lot of people, but for us it's big. About 100 people, which we're doing in September 1st. We're calling it the Newcomers Collision, right? Just picking up on the collision word. But it's going to be a one-day event where we are like over 6 to 7 hours, and we're going to have workshops running from financial literacy, mental health, job search, resume, housing, and other things, just to kind of prep the newcomers who are coming into Canada for the first time. It's their first day, right? What all they need to know before settling into here, right? Wow. And having a networking piece as well, just to make sure they have the mentors and the resources before they actually get started with their lives today. I think another thing I was mentioning to you is, one of the things that concerns me every single day and sometimes doesn't let me sleep at night is like how there are so many issues existing among these communities, whether you talk about sex trafficking amongst girls, who are international students, whether you talk about mental health issues tending to be the highest amongst international students with low sense of belonging, high rates of depression, high rates of anxiety, and even a lot of suicide rates, like growing by 5% every month, which is insane to me, right? How do we make sure we are catering to these things? And I think a biggest part of it is starting with that community piece, helping them feel they have a home away from home. And I think that's what Redefine wants to be for them, is being that home, not just away from home, but also being that space where they not just feel themselves, but get access to individuals who can help them be who they want to be, right? We have our ideal self and our current self. So basically helping them strive towards that ideal self and know that can exist in reality. And it's not just a hallucination or a dream. Right. And I think that's to the core. Another thing we're doing is, similar to the education chats we were having, is further really conversations around how do we redefine education, whether it be through our conversations with government folks here or university folks, but also we're really hosting a conference in India in December, actually 4 months down the line, where we're bringing in change makers all across the globe and bringing in individuals from government also all across to come have conversations about how do we really adapt to AI technology and other things that are happening today, and really make sure our workforce is actually being built for the future, right? And not for the past, right? Because that has already gone. So how do we make sure we adapt our education and training programs, both for even corporate firms, but even for educational institutions, to make sure they're prepping students for the real world today? So having a lot of conversations around that. And we have obviously our women networking events. This is one of our first only women networking events, which we mainly started with the idea because of what is happening with international students in Brampton mainly, was to create a space for the women to come together, see those role models for themselves. And we also build that community on WhatsApp, right? We're now developing an app actually where we're going to shift all of this there so people can have all access to all resources that we do, services, etc., all through that one platform and app, which they download, hopefully, so that when they land, let's say, at an airport in Canada, they don't need to rely on a stranger to help them navigate the space. They just go into that group, ping that chat, hey, I'm here, and we have services in place to help them reach their homes safely, soundly, with the right people around them, right? Because the people around you make the most difference. So yeah, those are a few things.
Wow, I don't even know which one of those to pick up on, because I mean they're all wonderful in their own right. And I think the biggest kind of theme that I'm hearing is, really working to create community.
Yeah.
Because if you've got that foundational community, then you can build on everything else. And like you say, some of the concerning trends that you're seeing, it's mental health being a huge part of that. It's that lack of, we need, as humans, we need to feel like we belong. We need to be able to aspire to things. We need to be able to have dreams, and then for them to actually be realistic. And having that community that is going to empower you and is going to, say, hey, you can do this, and here I'm going to introduce you to somebody who can help you.
Yeah.
I just think that's
And I feel like
amazing.
it goes a bit beyond that also. And one more thing I would say, not realistic dreams, but how do you make those dreams a reality? Yes. Because I think that's the biggest difference. Because a lot of these students come thinking in, oh yes, I dream about that. But obviously that's not a reality, right? Like that's just me dreaming. But I said dreams can never be realistic. They're dreams for a reason, right? And you should be striving towards dreams. Never make them realistic, right? Because strive for the West, at least, strive for the moon, and then you may get the stars.
I was just about to say that exact quote. But yes, but it's true. And I think, you kind of have to come at life in that way to really achieve success. You have to be quite headstrong about it, and having the tools and the support is
similar to what you just said, the tools and support, right? So in addition to that community, really making sure they have the tools and the resources to actually start moving towards those goals, right? Recently, we executed the Social Impact Fellowship program that we run, right? We have about 25 students, a cohort of 25 that we graduate every year from the fellowship. And what they do is they work on social impact initiatives across the globe. So we have people from Japan, Korea, South Asia, East Asia, Africa as well, who are all a part of that program. And they conduct social impact initiatives in their own individual countries during that entire period of 2 to 3 months, right? So what happens is they're not only getting mentorship from these change makers across the globe who are really celebrated, etc., through those workshops that are happening every single week, but they're also getting access to actually execute on the skill set that they have developed, getting those Canadian relevant experiences, hence opening up those barriers to entry that currently exist. But at the same time, for people outside of Canada, it also creates an opportunity for them to get exposure to people here, right? To get exposure to people across the globe, develop their own skill sets in those diverse areas. So within that period of 3 months, we were able to impact more than 15,000 people just out of the initiatives being executed, because we had 5 teams, each executing multiple initiatives throughout that period of 3 months. And each initiative catered to about 200 people. So that all just matched up, allowing for that big impact. All goes to show that if you just give even one person the tools and resources to create something, they have the potential to do it. They will do it, right?
Yeah.
And here are the results.
Yeah. And the other thing is, it's human. I would say in most cases, it's human nature to want to pass that on too.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're creating that environment. I've got some great mentors, and I've asked them, why do you spend your time hearing me stress about my business, right? But it's because they had mentors when they were first starting out that they were really grateful for, and they want to pay it forward. So I think all of this work that you're doing, and all of these students that you're helping, and other, newcomers, and all of this kind of thing, it's just going to keep expanding, and just, they're going to then want to be involved to help others. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing. It really is. Yeah, it really is. So before we move on to my regular guest questions and the Kickstart Spotlight, which is coming up, are there any? I mean, we've talked about a few of the projects. Are there anything else that you're working on that you want to speak about and get out there into the airwaves?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say it's three main things. One is we definitely have a mentorship program. We already finished one cohort, but we have another one starting September, obviously, because Newcomer is coming in. The second one is we're also running something called a social awareness initiative drive. So it's basically where we interview a lot of international students just to create awareness around their experiences, challenges that they are having, hoping to bring those voices someday to someone at the governmental level who hears those things and they're like, wow, this is the challenge, let's help solve this kind of
now
thing.
I understand.
Yes, just to give those voices a platform, right? To voice their opinions and share their perspectives. And I think, so we're doing it both on like Instagram and even on YouTube. Instagram is a page called Student Realities. So if anyone wants to support, plug in there. And I think the last one would be, we are actually also like focusing on how do we take upskilling components beyond just where we are based today. So for example, we know that almost 60% of international students come from South Asia, specifically India. So what we are doing there is starting September again, we're running like an upskilling fellowship program in India in collaboration with a few other organizations, one of them being the Bodhan Project. We're basically going to be releasing a fellowship that runs over a period of 3 to 4 months, kind of like a fellowship/mentorship, where we actually have these students who potentially want to come to Canada and really upskill themselves in those real world skills of public speaking, networking, so that by the time they come here, networking and talking to others, right, is something easy or something that comes naturally to them than something that they have to figure out all over again, which I think would put them many more months ahead, compared to other students who have come here without knowing any of those skill sets. So I think that's another thing. And now that I talk about it, it also reminds me when you asked me about how many people, through the Social Impact Fellowship program we have impacted, it's not 15,000. Because if it's 200 people we're impacting through each initiative, and we have 5 initiatives running per month, that's, as you can imagine, 1,000 people per month. Yes.
Right.
So let me correct myself.
Oh, that's there. Okay. No, it's good. It's good to correct, but it's still a hell of a lot of people. So I mean, it's fantastic, and just that last initiative that you mentioned, prepare, taking those steps. It's kind of looking at that full circle, isn't it? It's kind of we've now established assisting and helping people once they're here. What more can we do to actually prepare them? Because that, when you feel prepared going into something, again, more confidence, higher self-esteem, all of those important things, you're not going to lose.
And I think it's a combination of all those, right? Like preparation is, again, not just educational and academic, but it's also the upskilling portion, plus the combination of helping them form those networks early on.
Right.
So connecting those folks back home with folks who are already here in those universities. So these could be individuals who have gotten their admission at universities here in Canada, but are waiting for 4 months to make the move. Connecting them with individuals who are already here in their universities, have finished a year here, gives them a very good idea of what they can expect before coming in. Because a big part that adds to cultural shock is ambiguity, not knowing what exactly things are going to look like. And once you land, you're like, wow, this is different. This is not what I expected, right?
It's overwhelming, right?
So getting all those shockers beforehand and then making sure they know how to deal with those shockers before they actually land, right? I think that is that holistic preparation we talk about. It's that networking with combination of educational perspectives, academia, and those mentors that then allows that person to feel really prepared to then face kind of the new world, you could say. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. Are there any other initiatives that you're working on?
Yeah, no, for sure. One of the things that we're really working on towards right now is building schools. So I think 2 of the things that we also do is build schools and infrastructure, but also digitize classrooms. So one of the things we just finished recently in Lucknow in India is where for a school, for about 200 students that caters to them, we digitize the classroom by installing projectors, screens, etc. there so that we can create accessibility to education. Because even though I before mentioned how, we leverage the student knowledge here, repurposing it for students there, creating that free access, but also creating that access through infrastructure for these communities is on our like big priority list, you could say. And for that purpose, we recently collaborated with Walkway School and Project Power Global to basically build seven schools in Pakistan. And that's just a start. Obviously, it's going to be other places as well. And we're currently looking to raise about $10,000 for the 7 schools because each school costs about $1,500 on average. And obviously, like libraries, books, etc. as well that goes along with it. And we are currently also digitizing classrooms, as I mentioned. So if anyone is, wanting to donate and is feeling generous, even a dollar counts. I always say that because, for example, even a chair in a school costs about $1, right? So every chair you technically donate is an extra space for a student to come in and get access to education. So I think, $1 really counts.
Yeah, well, it goes a long way.
Yes,
yeah, for sure. And the best way, so I mean, if people do want to donate, they can do that through your website, I assume?
Yes, so through the website. And if you also follow us on Instagram, Redefined, if you just type it on Instagram, you should be able to come across us. We usually have these fundraisers and drives very active there. And it's usually through Zephy. And if you cannot find any of those, if by any chance, feel free to reach out or email us, letting us know that you would be interested, whether it be in volunteering, collaborating as well, something we're always open to. Because the more we can spread this work, we're always looking for schools also anywhere else, even within Canada, who need access to that digitization. And we're more than happy to help with the installation process, guide you all, train you all on how you can leverage those installations to further impact communities. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to skip on to the guest questions now.
Okay.
So as you may or may not know, in every episode, I have the same questions I ask every guest because I'm always interested to hear the answers to these. And then we'll move on to the Kickstart Spotlight. So the first, or I suppose the whole question really, over your career to date and your kind of experience, what is your proudest accomplishment to date, which I can imagine is going to be hard to drill down to one, to be honest. You can have more than one, it's fine. But then also, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned, like since taking this entrepreneurial step?
Yeah. Which question would you like me to answer
Proudest
first?
accomplishment first.
Okay. Okay. I would say, that's actually a tricky one. But
you can do the other one first and come back if you want. It's up to you.
Or I mentioned 2 or a few.
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think the biggest one would just be starting Redefined, to be very honest. I think because it's been an exploration journey for myself as well, right? I realized a lot about myself, whether it comes to risk-taking, whether it comes to believing in myself. Because, I also have been a student who has been at that low point in my life where I've just been tackling depression or tackling self-doubt. Self-rejection is a huge one, especially for students, right? You're applying to these hundreds of jobs every single day, not really knowing what you're doing wrong because all you get in return is no's or no responses, right? So you don't even know, what do I improve or work on to get better, because no one has the time to tell you what to get better on. So I think that, having been through that, and now being someone who's very comfortable and confident putting myself out there, and advocating not just for myself, but issues that others are experiencing, makes me feel so grateful for the journey I'm on. Whether it be LinkedIn or something, on LinkedIn at least, I have more than 30,000 people who are part of this journey with me. I don't think I could ever have imagined that to happen, So I feel like I dedicate a lot of what I've done to those people, to that family that I've been able to build, that community, because I feel like each one of them have been with me in my highs and my lows, because I've shared those constantly. When my family went through financial struggles, anything, I'm very open, right? I realized very early on, I used to hide a lot of things, right? You never know what someone thinks about you. So another thing I would say I'm really proud of is me being very transparent and vulnerable. I feel like is a big accomplishment from a personal perspective, because I think what that does is it enables you to become kind of that rock who is so confident because you've put everything out there. There's nothing to hide, right? So you feel like invincible in some ways, and you're like, the world's my oyster, and here I am to kind of, do what best I can, is putting myself out there and trying to achieve whatever I want to do. So I would say those two. I mean, obviously it's a lot more, but those two would be the biggest. And if I may want to slide one last thing,
Do
would
it.
be
Yes.
when I paid off my tuition loans. I think that was the biggest part as well, because I've seen my parents go through a lot to pay those. So I think it was a few months into my job when I paid it off, and I made a post about it also on LinkedIn, where I was just crying and weeping really ugly, but I was just so happy. And I remember when I called my parents on my phone on a video call, and I was like, guess what? They're like, what? Why are your eyes red? And I was like, I just paid it off, right? Because it was a huge lump sum, and you could just see, like, my dad, I saw him cry for the first time, and he was just bawling his eyes out because he was like, oh my God, thank you so much for uplifting that pressure in a way, right?
Right.
They didn't mean it in a way that I've put pressure on them, but, in the sense that it just felt like weight has been lifted
And
off.
I'm sure they have so much pride in,
Yeah.
taking the initiative to do that yourself, number one, and all the things that you're doing. I'm sure they
Yeah.
are just,
I hope.
overwhelmed with pride, I would imagine. That was such a beautiful answer to that question.
Thank
The
you.
way you approach that. Love it. Okay, so now then let's switch on to the biggest lesson that you've learned. Or I suppose you can reframe that in a way of kind of biggest lesson you've learned, or kind of advice that you would give somebody.
Yeah. I think biggest lesson combined with advice, I would say, like two pieces to it. I think the biggest lesson would be is just realizing that, like the way you think about yourself when you look at yourself every single day in the mirror has a huge implication for who you go on to become. I don't think we realize that enough. We hear a lot of things, positive self-talk, this and that. But I think there's a huge gap between identifying that and actually doing it and implementing on it. The things you say to your 5-year-old self when you're at 5 years, the things you say to yourself when you're 18 years old, I truly believe they play a huge role in who you go on to become. Because if you put out not just positivity, sure, right, but being opportunist, right, saying things that put positive things back into the environment, right? If you haven't, let's say, excelled at a course today, but just being like, oh, I am going to get that 100%, right? Instead of being like, oh, I just failed the exam, right? I feel like those simple like switches in mindset, I think I realized was a big game changer for me. And I think another thing also to add to that, I would say, is seeing no's in life or rejections as God's way of guiding me in the right direction. I think that's been a big one as well. So whenever now I don't actually get an opportunity, I'm like, you know what? This actually meant for a reason, right?
Yes.
I think, and I've realized this many times, when I don't get one opportunity, I actually end up getting something a lot bigger and something I may not have expected, to get.
Can relate. Yes.
And when you think about it, you're like, oh my God, thank God I did not get that one, because then this one would not happen.
Right.
And I think a lot of us spend a lot of time wasting, in a way, worrying about those no's and rejections and being like, oh, I'm not good enough, and etc. Right? And that puts you in that loop of just going down, down, down.
Right.
So I think realizing just, hey, focus on just putting in the effort.
Yeah.
The rest is going to come. Just be a bull. Just look forward. Just look towards your goal. Just keep putting the effort every single day. There is someone, whatever you want to believe in, God, energy, etc., that is going to make the results pop up. Right? It may not be now, it may not be today, but it may be tomorrow. It may be the next hour, or it may be 5 years down the line, right? Everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
So just know, keep going at it, and everything's going to come to you. Whatever you're meant for is going to come.
Yeah.
By hook or by crook.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. And I find a lot of the time as well, it comes when you need it.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the times it's the struggles that actually make us better. Right. It's how you respond to it. Yes. But they are a necessary part of the journey.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so the last section is the Kickstart Spotlight.
Yeah.
So every episode, I have my guest shout somebody out. So whether it's, a local small business, an organization that you work with, just somebody who's doing great things that you want to kind of put on blast.
Yeah.
Who would you like to shout out today?
So they're not within the Atlantic. Is that okay?
That's okay. Of course. Yeah, that's fine.
So recently I connected with someone from Deloitte itself, from Deloitte UK actually.
Okay.
Her name's Alice Hendy. okay, maybe I'm butchering her name, but Alice something is her name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's the founder of the organization called Ripple. So Ripple is basically like a browser extension for suicide prevention. So
Okay.
she was an individual who lost her brother to suicide.
Wow.
And what she found out and how our organization came about is when she was scrolling through his phone, she realized that he was searching up ways on how he can end his life. And in
Oh my
fact,
God.
the browser was supporting that. It was encouraging it. It was giving him options on things he could do to end his life. And that's when she realized, wait a second, that is where the issue is lying at. What if you could create something whereby if you just type something in the search box about ending your life or anything that is a trigger word, that space, it creates that pop-up. If you have that browser extension, what it's going to do is it's going to guide that person in the right direction. So it's going to say things like, you deserve the help. You need to be heard. Here are some online resources for you to view. Right? And there are multiple iterations of it. There are some which are chatting with someone online if you don't want to talk to someone on the phone, email, etc. So there are different avenues just to guide them in the right direction so that when you're at that vulnerable stage, you can actually make that right decision. And I know she is right now in that phase of just having as many organizations and institutions download that. It's free to download. Everything is free in that, right? Especially for institutions, etc. So it's free to download. So I feel like through this, if anyone can get, I urge you all to download that browser extension, get it onto your platform so that anyone who is a part of your community is not a victim of suicide, right?
Yeah.
At those vulnerable times. Yeah.
Wow. What great work to be doing. That's a great shout out. And I will add these details in the show notes as well, so anyone can kind of find them and kind of look into more. And actually, before we completely wrap up, how can my listeners connect with you and Redefined and how can they help and all of these kind of things? What's the best way for them to get in touch?
Best way to get in touch with Redefined would be our website. So redefined.social. That's it, no .coms. And then with me would be via LinkedIn. I take time to respond, but I promise once we connect, we can share other emails or whatever is necessary to do that. And I think if anyone's looking to get involved from a volunteer perspective, obviously there's always the website, but even our email address is a great point to reach out, redefined.npo@gmail.com. And if you're also an international student who is listening, you need any kind of help, whether it be financial, whether it be social, etc., feel free to email us there. I'm more than happy to also later share my WhatsApp number, which is always open to students to contact me in case there's any help needed. And we'll make sure we connect you with the right people if we may not have access to the right resources. Yeah.
Amazing. And again, I will add these into the show notes as well, so people know exactly how to reach you. Ritika, thank you so much for taking the time to come in today. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. And I'm kind of, my brain is all over the place because I'm kind of like, there are so many things that we should be doing better. You know what I mean? So thank you. I really appreciate such an insightful conversation.
Yeah.
And to my listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. And remember, if you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, share, rate and review, and follow us on social media at Kickstart Connections podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.